Microsoft Excel 2003 Data and Content Formatting, Columns, Rows, and Worksheets. Let's take a look in this video at the rows, the columns, and the worksheets and how we can do the formatting necessary for our data and content. We're going to resize our rows and columns. We're going to insert and delete some more columns and rows. Freeze or unfreeze. We'll hide them. It's a little bit, I know it sounds like tag here. You got freeze tag or, hide and seek, but it's freezing and unfreezing the rows and columns and either hiding the rows or columns so other people can't see them. And then finally taking a real brief look at worksheet formatting, which will help you decide if you need to add, subtract, delete, or move these worksheets around as well. Up until now, remember, we've been formatting cells, the cells themselves, maybe a range of cells, but pretty much concentrating on the cells. What about the columns and the rows? What can we do with those to help our Excel spreadsheets look even better? Well, let's open up our unformatted PTO Content 2. We've been working with this already. And again, you will have access to this file and you can practice on it as soon as you're done watching what I've done to it. And we'll see that our cells obviously are made up of intersections of our columns, which are right up here, and our rows. One of the reasons we might want to format the columns is because of the size. Look at here. If I select B2, I can see that identification badge is the full text here in my formula bar. Well, I can only see identification, and I didn't even get to see anything else, none of the part of the badge. If I printed this out, it would only show up this way. So what I want to do is I want to expand my column B so that I can see all of the text that I have here. Well, the simplest and most straightforward way to do that is, if you notice, when I roll my mouse over here on top of the columns, it changes to a down arrow when I'm on the column. That means I can select the entire column if I want to select B, or select the entire column as C or B, whatever one. But when I roll between the middle of these columns, it changes to the resize icon. In this case, you got the arrow going to the left, arrow going to the right, and the line right there in the middle. If I select and hold with my mouse, it will tell me my standard width of this column is 8.43 or 64 pixels. So if I want to, I can go ahead and drag to the right or move to the left, either way. Notice its size is either smaller or larger. Let's say I go up to maybe 124 pixels, which is about 17, and it says, all right, now look at my column B. It is now an appropriate size so I can see the entire text that's within that particular column. So this is my largest text so far, and my numbers, as we'll see a little bit later, are, they're smaller. So if I wanted to, I can come over here to D and do the same thing. I hover my mouse over until it changes to the resize icon. I grab it and move it on over, and bada bing, bada boom, there we go. We've got our PTO available. It's now viewable. I can see that. One other way that we can do this is by actually selecting the column and using the Format menu. Now, look at employee. It says employee, right? But let's say it's not only employee, but employee name. We'll add a little bit more text here. And let me tab over and notice I still can't see employee, I can see employee, just not employee name. So you've got employee name, and I want to resize this column. So I select A, I come up here to the Format menu, drop it down, and check this out. You have the cells, we've been doing that. Row we'll look at in just a minute, but here's the column. I can come down here and say width. I want to format the column's width. Notice our standard 8.43. But if I want it, let's say I want it to be the same size as B, I can then type in 17.0, click OK, and now column A and column B are the same size. But do I really want it to be the same size? Some people like to be really neat and just have the column be the same size as the amount of text that you have. Well, to do that, you can say, hey, column, I want you to fit to whatever the longest piece of text is in that column. In this case, what is it? Employee name, right. So if I click on Format and on Column, I can use Auto Fit Selection. So it will automatically fit whatever it is I have there. In this case, employee name is the largest of the text. And check that out. Now it fits. An identification badge, and now I can see everything that I have. But what if I wanted to resize the rows? Is it that much difficult? No way. Same thing. only the arrow's going a little bit different direction. They're going up and down. But notice I can take, let's say I want to take this row, row 2, and because these are going to be my column headers for my table here, I want it to be a little bit bigger, wider. So I can go ahead and say, all right, I can select the entire row by selecting there, or I can roll between the two of them with my mouse. It changes to the resize, and then I can go up or down, however big I want it. I'll make it a good size there. And see, and now if I click off it, this row is now larger. And so you can kind of eyeball and see that that must be something important. Maybe that's the top and the beginning of this particular column headers. Now, if I want to, and I don't want the text to be at the bottom, normally what could you do? You could highlight a range, right? But I know that every single one of these text on row 2 is going to be a column header, and I want them all to be in the middle. I want the text to be right there in the middle. I can select the row. Now watch this. I can now format the entire row. Right click, format cells, but now everything that I do will affect every single cell in that row, all the way over across the columns to the 256th that's out there. I can come over here and say alignment. I don't want it to be on the bottom, the vertical, up and down. I want it to be centered. So I click on here, I click center, I click OK, and look at that. Now my text in the middle of this heightened row is now in the middle. It's centered. Now if I come over here and just type something else, we got what? PTO available, PTO used, and PTO final. I'm just saying that. Now look, watch that. Automatically, because I formatted the entire row, my text is going to be centered and it's not going to be on the bottom. So let me go ahead and delete that. And now we can see that by taking this, we can resize. And again, I can do this on the row too. I can select the row, come up to format, row, and I get the same capabilities. I can change the height by typing in a number, or click auto fit, and it will automatically fit to however much text you have in that particular column. So if you're doing word wrap and the text wraps below and you want to make sure that it's visible, you could use the auto fit and it'll work for you there. So we've resized our rows and columns, but what if I want to insert columns in between? For example, I've got my employee name, my identification badge, and my date of birth, and all of a sudden Christina, who's my HR gal, says, you know what? You need to put the Social Security number on here for me, for my purposes. Or she decides to do that, and she's the one putting it together. Well, where would be a good place for that number? Probably between either employee name and identification badge, or identification badge and date of birth. So if I want to insert a column, I merely select the column that I want to move, because it's going to move to the right. I can right click on it and I can click insert. When I do that, it's going to move that one column. It used to be C, which was the date of birth, moves it over to the right and inserts the other column. Watch this. I also have my insert options. Notice the little format painter. It looks a little bit different than the format painter toothbrush, but it's just saying, what are your options? I can format it the same as the left. I can format it the same as the right, or I can say, you know what, I just want a blank. I format it myself. So I'll select that, and you select on it, and it says clear formatting, so there's no formatting in here. None whatsoever on this column, on B. On C, I should say. So now what I can do is I can type in Social Security. Now watch what happened. Remember, I said I don't want any formatting on that. What happened? I lost the formatting that I have here on this whole row, didn't I? Social Security is now going to be down here at the bottom. So if I say Social Security number, I'd have to come back in, right-click on that cell, or highlight the whole row again, either way, and say Format. I want the text to be in the center. See, it went back to being the default, which is the bottom. So now it's back up. Social Security number. I've now inserted the new column here. And let's say I wanted to insert another column here, because I've got the PTO that's available, my PTO that's been used, but maybe I have the PTO I started with at the beginning of the year. So that way I not only know how much I've used and how much is available, but how much did I start with, or how much was given to me. So again, I can go to E. I want it to be over here on this side between DOB, date of birth, and PTO available. So I come up here, I again right click, insert, and it then puts in another one right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave the formatting, the insert options the same. Format the same as the left, that's fine. So I'm coming in here, and now I'm going to call this PT, oop, I need to spell it right, PTO given. Tab over. I can see I need to resize my column, but we know how to do that. We can right click on here, go to format. Let's go to column, auto fit the selection, and now that's ready to go. So we can see how we can insert the columns. Inserting new rows, the same thing, except it moves down. So you want to select the row that's underneath where you want it to be inserted. So if I want to go and insert a row between Jeremy and James here, I would select row 6, right click, insert, and there we go. So you see there's James, and I get the same options. Do I want the same as above and below? Sounds good. And you know, that formatting. And by the way, that format will stay until I make another change somewhere on my Excel spreadsheet. So if I start typing over here, see it said, okay, you're done. So at any point in time, if you see that stay and remain, it's going to do that until you've kind of finalized what you've done, and then you can move off and do something else if you want to. So we've gone ahead and inserted some new rows and in some columns and saw how to do some basic formatting with that and resized. But what if we are using a very large worksheet where we have information not only just right here in the main view, but we've got all the way over here on other columns, all the way out here to maybe L or even further if we want to go. We can be out here to R. What if I want to be able to see the original employee name and all the employees as I go through column after column, and I just want to make sure I'm still tracking with the same the individual, that I'm still working with Jeremy, or we'll insert Kevin here so that way we have a nice even amount. What I can do is select the entire column that I want to, or to the right of where I want to freeze this entire column. I can also do this for the rows, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But let's say I go ahead and say I want to freeze this column A, and then it will always stay no matter what when I move back and forth. How do I do that? Well, I can come up here to Window, and I have this option that says Freeze Panes. So I go ahead and I click Freeze Panes. Now watch what happens. I'll deselect, and notice this it kind of highlights this one line. That's kind of a clue. Now watch. Their identification badge went away. There went Social Security. There went date of birth. And you'll notice that my A column stays here as I traverse across my worksheet here. If I keep going, you know, all the way up to double A over here, I would know that whatever column this was for under double A, it would still apply to this row, to Chris. So I would know the name, or if it was down here on James, I could go over here to James and then go, all right, now I know that that tracks to James. So you can see how this is going to be very useful for us if we want to make sure that we keep a certain column or columns. I can take a whole length of these. Let's scroll all the way back here. Let's say I want not only A, well, first let me unfreeze all the panes. So that unfreezes them. Let's say I want both of these columns. Well, I'll go to C now. I'll click this, click Freeze Panes. Now watch. See, now both A and B remain there while I traverse on down for the columns. This works really good, especially if you have row after row of data. Let me unfreeze those panes, start over again. And let's say that I want to make sure that I'm putting the right information in across the row based upon the column headers that are up here. Well, I'll go to 3 here because I want to freeze these two panes up here. I click Window, Freeze Panes, and now as I scroll down, I'm just using my scroll here, and I can do it over here, click over here. Notice this remains the same. So if I put in somebody's name here, we'll put in Bob, and an identification badge, and social security number of 555-56-5626, or I hope that's not nobody's social security number. Date of birth is July 5th. And again, now I can see what I need to put in for that particular row. Now if I scroll up and that disappears, see, I'm constantly keeping these panes frozen. So that's how we can freeze the panes and allow us to maneuver throughout our spreadsheets as we, need to add something or, go down a little bit further, but we want to remain up here or move to the side to side. But let me go ahead and unfreeze the panes here and say, what if I wanted to hide information? I can see one big one right here, Social Security number. Besides Christina, who we've said in the past is our HR person here, who else needs to know the Social Security number of everybody else on this in this group? So what I can do is I can hide columns and lock them so that only the person who's actually creating or doing the hiding can unlock them. This is important for data that needs to maybe be sent out to somewhere else. But I mean, we need to know what identification badge are. Or maybe we want to hide both of those and we just have their date of birth. Or maybe no one wants that information. Just how much PTO has been given, how much is available, and how much is going to be used. And that's what myself, Dan, Jeremy, James, Frank, and all the other people can look at. But this information here, these three columns, we don't want to show. Well, no problem. What I can do is I can literally select with my mouse. I can select and then hold down the control key and select multiple columns. And in this case, I come up and I right click, and you'll notice that you have the hide and the unhide. If I click on the hide, notice it's disappeared. Now I'm pretty smart and I can see that, hey, you know what? I've noticed that I've got A and then there's E. Well, what happened to B, C, D? That must mean, and I can see that it's slightly, changed. It's got a nice little highlight there. Also, watch my mouse. That's resizing. And then, oh, look at that. See how it shows the double? That means that there are columns that are hidden in there. So if I right-click here and I unhide, bada bing, bada boom. Here we go. We get them all back. So here's my identification badge, my Social Security, and my date of birth. Now, if I save this file and I have protected these columns, nobody else besides the person who logs in and utilizes this with the same credentials will be able to open those. So this information would be hidden from prying eyes that want to know. So that's how we can hide not only columns, but again, I can select, maybe I don't want anyone to see Jeremy's information. So I can right-click on this and I can hide it. Again, I can see that I got that slightly darker line here showing that there's some hidden rows in this case. So then what I can do is to unhide it, I just roll over until it turns to that double line versus the single. See, that just resizes the row. I do the double and I right click and I can say unhide. And now Jeremy pops back in and I'm able to see all of the rows that I have here in place. Now, I'm not going to get into too many details. I mentioned that we can secure those hidden columns. The way that you would do that is by turning protection on, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail just to show you where that would be. Once you've hidden those particular columns or rows, you can then protect the sheet, which means people aren't able to edit that. Or you can say they can edit certain ranges, protect the whole entire workbook, not just this worksheet, and protect and share the workbook. We'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail later on. So we've seen how to work with our rows and our columns by hiding and unhiding, by freezing the panes, by resizing, inserting. One other thing we want to show before we move on in our series is, what about our worksheets themselves? We've kind of not really talked too much about them, but take a look down here. You'll notice that I have sheet 1, sheet 2, and sheet 3. If I want to, and you've seen this already, if I want to change the name of the worksheet, I could say this is 2006. I can then double click on sheet 2 and say this is 2007, and double click on this one and say it's 2008, which then changes the tabs that we have. Now what I can do, of course, is add more sheets. Let's say I forgot and I said, oh, you know what, we're still kind of talking about 2005. I can right click and I can insert a sheet. Now notice it's going to say, now what do you want to do? I want to insert a worksheet. This is a little bit different because you can also insert certain other things by using that right clicking on the whole worksheet. So I'm going to say I want to insert a whole worksheet, and there we go. Now it moved. Remember, I selected this one, so whatever one you select, it always moves it over to the left, or it moves you to the right and inserts it to the left. So here now I could double click and say this is 2005. We also have the ability, obviously, to change the tab colors, which we've shown you before, but we'll review. You can go ahead and say, well, we're currently in this year, so we'll go ahead and say we're green for 2006. That way I know which current year I am in and select on the appropriate worksheet. If I want to move any one of these, I can click and hold on it, and notice it shows the worksheet as a little piece of paper with an arrow pointing where it currently is. If I move it over, it says, oh, Nate, okay, now it's going to be over here, now it's going to be over here, and when I release, it is now moved over to be beyond the 2007. Well, I don't want that, so I can come over here and say, nope, put it back there. So again, you can maneuver and manipulate your worksheets. You can add, you can even delete worksheets. If I wanted to get rid of 2005, I right-click and just say delete it. And now I'm back to my original, the 2006, 2007, and 2008, my original 3 worksheets that I had. Of course, with other things, with the columns and the rows, we also have for our worksheets the format, where we can come to the format sheet, and here where we can rename this one instead of 2006. We can even hide worksheets just like we do with anything else, and then we can change the background if we want the background color, or add a photo in the background, and then change the tab color here as well. As with anything with Excel, there are many different places to do the exact same things. In this case, for worksheets, you can just go to the individual sheet format and do many of the things that you just saw us do with columns and also the rows as well. So in this video, we took a look at how our columns, our rows, and our worksheets can affect how our data and content is formatted. Sometimes we might need to resize those columns so that we're able to see the entire thing that's going on with our text or our data within those columns, or even rows sometimes. We might need to add a few additional ones. We might say, hey, well, you know what, I need a column, a different title that goes in between these 2 columns, so I can insert one or delete one if I need to. Same thing with rows. We can also freeze and unfreeze pane. So if I want to freeze the top 2 rows so I can scroll down and still see what column I'm under, I can do that. Or if I freeze columns, and then I can sort or kind of scoot left to right and see what's going on with that as well. And then we, of course, found out that not always do we want to allow certain information to be viewed, so we can hide the rows or the columns and even unhide them if necessary, and protect it by protecting the worksheet. Then we noticed that, hey, worksheets, they need love too. And so we needed to know how to do some formatting for our worksheets, including adding new worksheets to our workbooks, or changing the tab colors, changing the names of them, all that, a little bit of review, but also something that we all need to be aware of. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.